Hello, everyone. Welcome. A few more people are still entering. But welcome back, everybody. Or if you're joining us for the first time, it's wonderful to see you. I think many of you haven't seen us for about 2 months, with the exception of a few of you that were able to join us last month in March during our pilgrimage. So welcome everyone to our webcast series following in the footsteps of the Lotus-Born Guru, the life and liberation of Guru Rinpoche. For those of you that were able to join us last February, welcome back. And again, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we're excited to have you with us as we continue to journey through the life story of Guru Padmasambhava. So thank you again for joining us. Our session will be hosted by our wonderful NACOR team, who some of you were able to meet in person last month. But I am Robbie. I am doing the general framework of the webcast, and I'm in the US, in California. And then Stefan, Peter, and Noor will introduce themselves.
Hello, happy Guru Rinpoche Day. I'm Stefan, joining you today from Spain, Catalonia, the Pyrenees Mountains, and we'll be sharing some parts of this webcast with you today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Peter. I'm joining you today from Samuel, New York. I'll be sharing some of the stories that unfolded at the sites.
Hello, everybody. Happy Guru Rinpoche Day. I am Noor, and I am joining you today from Buddhadharma in Nepal. And I will be sharing some stories as well, and also quotations from Guru Rinpoche's principal biography called the Pinnacle. I look forward to have you here. Thank you.
So as we do every month, and with everything we begin, it's good to first start by setting a proper motivation. So let's first start by remembering the words of the awakened masters of the past. By the power and the truth of our gathering here today, may all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the great happiness, devoid of suffering, and may they dwell in the great equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. Having set that motivation, we now invoke Guru Rinpoche, as we do in each webcast, just as the great masters of our time have done. In today's session, we will invoke Guru Rinpoche using the famous Vajraguru mantra chanted by Chagdu Tulku Rinpoche.
Oh, no.
So to recap, in our previous webcasts, we explored how Guru Rinpoche established sacred sites, trained disciples at Samye Chimpu, and initiated them into the Vajrayana and shared the complete Buddhadharma from its foundational principles all the way up to the highest teachings. This month, the second month of the Tibetan lunar calendar, we honor Guru Rinpoche's entrance into the Dharma. So, in today's webcast, we will delve deeper into how Guru Rinpoche brought the Dharma to Tibet, focusing specifically on how he transmitted the Dzokchen teachings, which are considered the pinnacle of the Buddhadharma. Today's episode marks the 8th installment of our webcast series, where we've been exploring, as I said before, the sacred sites of Guru Rinpoche, first starting in India and then traveling into Nepal and finally reaching Tibet. If you missed any of the previous webcast series, you can catch up on everything. All of our recordings are currently held in our NACOR website. If you go just to nacor.org, you'll find them there. Or if you go to our YouTube channel, just search NACOR in YouTube, you'll find our channel there. It's the one with Guru Rinpoche's red seal. And on our Vimeo pages, you'll see the link to the Vimeo uploads is on our NACOR website, nacor.org. That's going to have all the different languages as well. So if English is not your first language and you wish to listen in another language, we have several options there that you can explore. So jumping now back to last month's, which only a handful of you that are here today were there for. We were very, very fortunate to be able to explore Guru Rinpoche's sacred sites of Nepal. So here we have a picture of our group in the cave in Maratika, the lower cave of Maratika. And it was a wonderful group. I think everything went well. We were graciously led by Khenpo Gyaltsen, who is one of the senior monks of Kaining Shedrub Ling. He's the head Khenpo in the monastic college, and we were very lucky to have him sharing some of his vast treasury of information and knowledge. This is us in a seated meditation in the lower cave. Aside from Maratika, we also visited other sites around the Kathmandu Valley in Bodha Stupa. You'll see here, this is where our webcast series where we set everything off from. This is where Guru Rinpoche made his vast aspirations to bring the Dharma to Tibet. So this was on the this was on Choto Duchen, this was our song offering on Choto Duchen, and we decorated the top of the stupa, adding a new cloth around the top. We were able to make a collective offering to do that together. We also visited the Swayambhu Stupa, and in the middle there you'll see the Vajrayogini temple, and on the left is Khenpo Gyaltsen just giving some spontaneous teaching in Maratika. So it was really a wonderful time, and we plan to do more of these trips, hopefully next year. We'll update you as we finalize what our plans are for future pilgrimages. But for those of you that were able to join us on this trip, it was really, really wonderful getting to spend time with you all. I'm sure Peter and Stefan and Noor could also share some of their experiences. But we hope to see you again, and hope to see new faces as well as we continue to offer these pilgrimage opportunities. Stefan or Noor or Peter, did you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I think for everybody, it could be said that it's really the transition from being like a sort of an armchair pilgrim at home, experiencing these sacred sites, to have the opportunity, the very precious opportunity, to visit these sites directly where, so to speak, enlightenment unfolded. And we're joining this sort of continuous streams of pilgrims that over thousands of years here at these sites have also done practice and blessed the sites. And you kind of dive into this sacred atmosphere of offering and practice in meditation, and had a good fortune to be guided by exceptionally Khenpo Gyaltsen, which was just wonderful. And I think we had a really wonderful group that we're all very, very fortunate about and very, very grateful for. And yeah, as you do the pilgrimage, you grow together and you become like a family. And we had a wonderful time sharing and practicing together and having this sort of shared experience, but also shared offering and shared receiving the blessings from each of those sides. Yeah. So thank you all so much. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.
Great. So I don't have anything particularly to say about the pilgrimage that wasn't said already. And I very much agree that we had a really nice group and everybody, I think we all managed to do a lot of virtue in this time. And I'm very happy about that. And I look forward to doing it again and again. And for many of us to join who are in this webcast to come actually here. And on that note, I would like to also thank everybody who is joining us on this webcast right now for their generosity, because it's truly, truly the generosity of our viewers which keeps us going. And for those of you who are new here, you could support us by making either a recurring donation or a one-time offering to us on DonorBox or PayPal. And I think the information for that is on the screen right now. And yeah, any additional funds that we have, they go directly towards expanding the width of the resource that Nekor is, which is helpful for really anybody who is interested in accessing or knowing more about these sacred sites. So it's really appreciated that people care about it and people donate for it. So I'm very thankful. And I wanted to let people who are new to know that this is how they can support us. Okay, that being said, let's begin.
Okay, so in today's webcast, we're turning to the transmission of the Dzokchen, or the Ati Yoga, or Great Perfection teachings. And this is really here a continuation from our previous webcast from has been a while, February. It's really part of the full transmission of the precious teachings by the great teacher Guru Rinpoche and the other great awakened masters who came to Tibet, and establish the tradition of the Buddhadharma in its fullest. And here we can say that it's a continuation of the Vajrayana teachings. As we may remember, or maybe can look back up in the February webcast, you can see how Guru Rinpoche established the precious Vajrayana teachings by granting empowerments principally at Samye Chimpu, and then introducing his disciples to the Kagye teachings and sending them off into retreat in various caves. And subsequently, these students attained great siddhis or accomplishments. Yeah? And here, we're looking now further into the transmission of what is seen or regarded as the very pinnacle, or sort of the highest point of all the Vajrayana teachings, which is said to grant liberation to the practitioner in one single lifetime. And also what we have heard already about or seen in the past is that these teachings ultimately, when fully perfected, allow the practitioner to attain what is called the precious rainbow body, where the whole physical body of the practitioner dissolves into rainbow light, which is sort of also regarded or seen as the greatest accomplishment. And these teachings of the great perfection or Ati Yoga really introduce the practitioner in a very direct way to our fundamental Buddha nature, and really let the practitioners work directly and experience this very nature sort of face to face. Yeah. And these kind of teachings are given to the student in a most intimate meeting between the guru and the disciple, and are often kept hidden for a long time till the students are ready and matured enough. Yet at the same time, there's such an integral and fundamental part of this precious lineage from Guru Rinpoche that there's sort of the entire path is flavored through these teachings. So on all stages of our path, when we receive in this precious transmission, precious lineage from Guru Rinpoche through our teachers' teachings on shamatha meditation or vipassana or the bodhisattva path, it's always to some degree knowingly or unknowingly flavored or inspired by these very precious teachings on our fundamental nature, and are pointing in that direction and creating the right circumstances for us to experience our fundamental nature. So as I said, this is really at the very heart of this amazing tradition that we're following. And it's really very much also emphasized by the Pema Katang, the main biography of Guru Rinpoche that we're following, and all the others that are outlining the establishment of this extremely profound lineage. And if we look at the sort of origin of this very precious lineage, then we're led back to the great master Garab Dorje. That's his name in Tibetan. In Sanskrit, it's Prahevacha, and you can see him here in the center of these three masters. And then to the left, you can see the master Manushimita, and to the right, you can see the master Sri Singha. So these were sort of the original three masters, so to speak, of this lineage of great perfection teachings. And traditionally, it's said that these teachings were given first to the first human Dzokchen master called Garab Dorje, who, like Guru Rinpoche, was actually from Udayana. So that's quite interesting. And Garab Dorje received these utmost precious teachings in a vision from Vajrasattva, from Buddha Vajrasattva. And it's often said that when he sat down for this meditation, he was sort of an ordinary human, and when he got up, he was fully enlightened. So these were sort of these immense blessings of this particular tradition that were passed down to Garab Dorje Prahevacha. And subsequently, Garab Dorje further practiced and codified sort of these teachings into what is often called the 6,400,000 verses of the Great Perfection that Garab Dorje then transmitted actually to his disciple Manushimitra, and likewise to Guru Rinpoche, who in turn gave these teachings to the great master and Vidyadhara Sri Singha, who subsequently transmitted them to another disciple called Jnana Sutra. And these transmissions actually often unfolded again in the esoteric landscape, so to speak, of the great charnel grounds of India. And it's a long time ago, but we have touched upon this briefly in our webcast in September, last September 2024, when the main topic was the 8 great charnel grounds and Guru Rinpoche practicing there. And also actually during these events, Guru Rinpoche received teachings from these great masters at various locations. You can also find more about it in both our India volume as well as our Tibet volume. And as Garab Dorje transmitted these teachings, it was his disciple Manushimitra who then codified them further and categorized them into 3 categories, which are called Semde, or the mind category, Longde or space category, and Mengakde or pith instruction category. And all the 3 great masters that you can see here further contributed to not only the transmission, but also the teachings of this extremely profound lineage. And all of them became these great accomplished Dzogchen masters that we're looking up to as sort of the original founders or forebearers of this absolutely amazing tradition. And the teachings were then transmitted to three great masters in turn. So on the next slide, we can see Guru Rinpoche in the center. We can see the Vidyadhara and Pandita Vimalamitra to the left. And we can see the great Tibetan translator Lochen Verotsana to the right. So when Guru Rinpoche was active in India, he met actually all three great teachers. So he received alongside Manushimita the teachings from Garab Dorje. This unfolded in Udayana. Actually, on the very site that Guru Rinpoche was born, it says it unfolded on the Isle of Danakosha. And we have the great Pandita Vimalamitra, who received the Dzogchen teachings from the great teacher Sri Singha, as well as from Jnana Sutra, which I mentioned briefly before, the fourth teacher of which we currently don't have a picture. And then the great translator and disciple of both Pandita Vimalamitra and Guru Rinpoche, the Tibetan Lotsawa, who is actually praised as sort of the foremost of the great translators, who traveled to India and likewise received the teachings from Garab Dorje and Sri Singha. But really what unites these three masters here seen, who transmitted the teachings to Tibet, their sort of root guru, is the great master Sri Singha. And we also learned about that in our September webcast when we spoke of Guru Rinpoche actually receiving these teachings from the great Vidyadhara Sri Singha. And so as we look one by one into these various lineages, first we will be looking at the lineage transmitted by Guru Rinpoche, really to his heart disciples, and we'll be learning now about how this transmission unfolded and later who upholded this lineage. Very beautiful stories. And then secondly, we'll be looking at the lineage of Pandita Vimalamitra. And finally, we will just briefly touch upon the lineage of Longchenpa, and we probably discuss it further in another webcast in June. So it brings us back to the events that unfolded at Samye, and these various transmissions that we heard about in our last webcast as well as in the present webcast. They unfolded while the construction of Samye was happening. And here we will be turning to Peter, who will actually share in interesting circumstances that unfolded that originally could be seen maybe as something negative or potentially inauspicious, but we see that Guru Rinpoche transformed the sort of circumstances in a most beautiful opportunity for teachings and to further spread the precious Dharma throughout Tibet. So, Peter.
Thank you, Stefan. Right, so this is a story of blessings in disguise. So while Guru Rinpoche and his disciple Yeshe Tsogyal, they had gone into deep retreat, but in the meantime, things were starting to unravel back at Samye. The atmosphere there was changing and not in a good way. Not long after they left, King Trisong Detsen's ministers began whispering among themselves, wondering where their fair queen, Yeshe Tsogyal, had gone. The kingdom itself was rapidly leaning toward the Dharma, and these ministers who were clinging still tightly to their old power, their old ways, saw this, their queen leaving, Guru Rinpoche being there, as a serious threat. So when the king finally admitted that he had offered his own queen to Guru Rinpoche, that was it. The ministers took it as a sign of weakness and they pounced. They began to stir up fear and resentment, claiming that this foreign yogi, this Indian stranger, had taken their queen and was undermining Tibet's proud traditions. They used this story to rally opposition, demanding not only that Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal be exiled from Tibet, but that if the king refused, they'd force him to abdicate the throne. If you look here at this beautiful image, you'll see Guru Rinpoche is there in the center. To his left, we have Lachamandravā, who we learned about in previous webcasts, in the practice in Zahor and at Maratika. So that's Lachamandravā to the left, and to the right we have Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal. So not wanting to bring any further hardship upon the king, Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal, who is there again on the right, agreed to leave, but only in appearance. It was a strategic retreat, not a defeat. The Mahaguru formally stepped away from his duties at Samye, but instead of crossing the border and disappearing, he and Yeshe Tsogyal journeyed together throughout Tibet with a devoted group of disciples. Along the way, they blessed the land, practiced in sacred places, and concealed powerful treasures known as Dharma, meant for future generations. It was during this time that Guru Rinpoche established the 8 great sacred caves of practice. These are the same ones that we explored in our webcast last February, which you can still watch on YouTube. So even after the Mahaguru and the royal consort, Yeshe Tsogyal, had officially left, the danger still hadn't passed. Some ministers weren't satisfied. They still feared Guru Rinpoche's power. That tantric yogi is dangerous, they said. If we don't stop him now, he'll curse all of Tibet. And so they sent assassins, silent and swift on horseback, to hunt him down. As the group approached the Tibetan border, Guru Rinpoche paused. He turned to his escorts and calmly warned them, "At dawn, trouble will come." Sure enough, the next morning, the assassins arrived, swords drawn, ready to strike. But just as they moved in, Guru Rinpoche made a small, subtle gesture, and instantly the assassins froze, stiff as stone statues. Not a sound, not a breath, they were made completely still by Guru Rinpoche's power. Then Guru Rinpoche turned to his companions and said, "Throw these mustard seeds at them. I must go. There are demons waiting to be tamed on the southwest border." And with that, the Mahaguru took off, rising into the sky on his horse, his Dharma robes billowing in the wind, his staff rattling in the air. The escorts then followed his instruction. They tossed the mustard seeds, and as they struck the assassins, the spell lifted. The attackers looked around, stunned, but Guru Rinpoche was already gone. And so, what began as exile turned into a divine opportunity, you could say. Now free from interference, the Mahaguru and Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal were able to enter even deeper retreat, unbothered by the worldly affairs that were taking place sort of in the center of the kingdom. But they didn't disappear. Together with their closest disciples, they traveled across Tibet, again, blessing the land, attaining realization, and they continued to plant treasures throughout the land, ready for future seekers to one day uncover. So now we'll turn to Rabi, who's going to talk about the Mahaguru's return to Samye.
Yes, thank you, Peter. So during this time of the Mahaguru and Yeshe Tsogyal's exile, as Peter pointed out, it was actually quite blissful for the two. They were able to enter into retreat and weren't necessarily perturbed with the worldly affairs of the kingdom, but King Trison Ditsen was still left with a nation of Tibetans that were sort of yearning for the Dharma and for more teachings. And so knowing this, King Trison Ditsen, and also having still a deep devotion for Guru Rinpoche. So at this time, King Trison Ditsen had to allow Guru Rinpoche to be exiled to kind of appease his ministers. But the king himself wasn't convinced that Guru Rinpoche was a menace to the kingdom or anything like this. So knowing that the Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal were in retreat, and knowing where they were, King Tresen Dutsen finally decided it was a good idea to bring them back. And he sent some messengers to find Guru Rinpoche and to offer gold and other precious substances to lure Guru Rinpoche back to the kingdom. And so it was that Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal returned from exile and came to once again teach the devoted Tibetan people the Dharma. The hostile ministers heard about the Mahaguru's imminent return and were furious, but even so, they joined in the welcoming party and put on a smile, and they sort of suppressed their fear and apprehension and were able to greet the Guru in a way that made it seem as though he was a welcome sight. And so it was that the king, abbot, and the entire Tibetan people gathered together to welcome them. When the Mahaguru finally arrived, everyone prostrated and paid their respects, but to the king's surprise, he looked and did not see Yeshe Tsogyal initially. All he saw were some Indian servants and was wondering what had happened to his queen. He anxiously inquired what was going on, asking Guru Rinpoche, and Guru Rinpoche gave sort of a broad smile and tapped the Katvanga trident, which you see Yeshe Tsogyal holding in this picture here. This is called a Katvanga. You'll see it in Sanskrit. But Guru Rinpoche sort of tapped the trident, and instantly the Katvanga transformed into Yeshe Tsogyal herself. So oftentimes, usually when you see Guru Rinpoche depicted, he's holding the Katvanga. This is actually Yeshe Tsogyal concealed as the Katvanga. So when you see this image of Guru Rinpoche, you can also think of it as a sort of Yabyum on a deeper level, a more hidden level. But at the appearance, it looks like it's just a trident. Everyone was amazed and inspired at this incredible display. Even the evil ministers who were plotting his death not long ago. They were now becoming more aware that the Mahaguru was truly no ordinary being. Still, for them, fear was sort of the dominant emotion that they were experiencing. And recalling what happened to their hired assassins who were turned to stone, they were worried that they might be faced with a similar fate. And so they decided to put their evil schemes aside, if only for a short time. The Mahaguru, for his part, returned to his residence at nearby Samye Chimpu, the caves just above Samye Monastery, and we'll learn more about more of the unfolding of the transmission of Dzokchen from here.
So yeah, on the image here, you can first see Samye Chimpo, which is always in many ways a starting and an ending point for these transmissions of the sacred Dharma. We have another image here that we have also shared in our last webcast with you, where you can really see down from the Samye Chimpo caves to the valley of Samye. And so we're going back to here. We have another image where you can see Guru Rinpoche on the left side surrounded by his 25 disciples and the wonderful accomplishments and blessings that are displaying in manifold ways. And also this precious tanka really depicts sort of the heart disciples, 25 in number, who received these most precious transmissions from Guru Rinpoche. And in particular, of course, as we will see amongst all of them, it's actually Kanda Yeshe Tsogyal who really, through her devotion in particular, and through her absolute dedication to the spiritual path, became the foremost sort of leader or heart disciple leader in terms of the other disciples. And it was to her that Guru Rinpoche first would grant these precious teachings, alongside another wonderful Dakini that we will hear shortly. But so it's also an important site again at Samye Chimpu where the Dzokchen teachings then would be taught in the near future. And we will now, having seen sort of again the heart disciples that this was transmitted to, look into how actually the transmission of these teachings was first requested, which created sort of the auspicious conditions for them to be eventually revealed in their manifold ways.
Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, so, even though Guru Rinpoche had already shared countless profound teachings, empowerments, transmissions with his students, there was one thing he had yet to do, and never in public. He wouldn't even speak the word Dzokchen, the great perfection. It wouldn't even come out of his mouth. But King Trisung Detsen, for his part, he had some idea about it. He had heard whispers about this secret, sacred teaching. And his longing for the Dharma was so strong, he couldn't ignore it. He heard it, something kind of came up within him. He had to know more. So what did he do? He sent messengers to Mount Kailash, to the far west of Tibet, hoping to invite a great Indian master by the name of Buddhadharma to teach on Dzogchen, to teach on this profound teaching he had, began to be sort of inspired to learn more about. But instead of coming in person, Buddha Gyuha had sent back a message, which reads as follows.
I am practicing on Mount Kailash and will not be going to Samye. However, in our country, the land of the noble ones, there is no Mahasiddha greater than Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava. He has received all the teachings on Dzogchen, or the Great Perfection, and has gained complete mastery over all appearance and existence, samsara and nirvana. He has fully mastered the Great Perfection. And as he is already with you right now, there is no reason for me to come.
So not long after that, Tibet was celebrating the beginning of the horse year, and it was the Dharma King Trisung Detsen's 49th birthday. It was a grand occasion, a huge elaborate ceremony with many of the greatest masters and panditas were in attendance, and presiding over all of it was Guru Rinpoche himself. And so it was in that very special moment before this incredible gathering of wisdom holding beings, you can say the king didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, he bowed deeply before the Mahaguru and made the following humble, heartfelt request.
Today marks the beginning of a crucial year for Tibet. Buddha has said that you are a master of the Dzogchen, or Great Perfection teachings, and that you hold dominion over all that appears and exists in samsara and nirvana. Surely you have teachings to share with us. Please grant us these teachings here in Tibet on this auspicious new year.
As the devoted representative of all of Guru Rinpoche's disciples, King Trisung Detsen was pleading not only for himself, but for the future of Tibet. He added the following.
If you cannot, at least give us the essential instructions. And if not even that, Buddha said you have the instruction to the nature of mind. Please grant us that much.
And what happened next left the assembly in awe. The king asked Guru Rinpoche to reveal something deeply personal, the name of his own root teacher, the one who introduced him to the nature of mind. But Guru Rinpoche did not say a single word. He remained completely silent to that question. So then later on at the translation center at Samye, known as Dragyorling, the king asked again. And at that time, Guru Rinpoche was working with Vimala Mitra, whose image we saw earlier, Stefan mentioned, and as well as several translators on sacred texts. And once more, Vimalamitra stayed silent, leaving it to the Mahaguru. But again, Guru Rinpoche said not a single word. He simply got up and left. And then even when Yeshe Tsogyal and others gently pressed him to reveal the truth of his own root teacher, Guru Rinpoche held firm. He said not a word, and 3 years went on with none of them knowing who Guru Rinpoche's own root teacher was. But it was then during the auspicious monkey month of the monkey year, on the 10th day, that the auspicious moment arrived. At the temple of Butsar Sekarling at Samye, one of the temples at Samye, just as he was preparing to leave, Guru Rinpoche was preparing to leave, I should say, disciples gathered around and asked, where are you going? And Guru Rinpoche replied, half amused, half exasperated.
Everyone in Tibet, from King Trisong Detsen and his court down to the most ordinary citizen, is desperate to discover the name of my root teacher, he said. You think they were all dying of thirst, so now I will reveal it. Follow me. He led them up to the sacred side of Samye Chimpu, stopping in front of the entrance to the Drakmar Kirtsang, and the crowd stood in breathless silence as Guru Rinpoche turned to face them. You want to know the name of my root teacher, right? And there was a breathless silence. My root teacher is the glorious Heruka, the fearless Vidyadhara, Sri Singha.
And it was at that exact moment that something amazing happened. The sky filled with a host of enlightened beings in all of Tibet, the mountains, the trees, the people, and even the unseen spirits bowed in deep homage toward India, honoring that great master, Sri Singha. And that was the first time Guru Rinpoche ever spoke the name of his root teacher aloud. Now you can see this image before you. Guru Rinpoche is on the left, and there we have the great Vidyadhara Sri Singha on the right. And if you want to learn more about this meeting, please check our webcast from last September, or you can also dive into the India volume of our Guru Rinpoche book series. So with that kind of momentous moment having occurred, the teachings began. So even the king and his disciples, I should say, excuse me, even with the king and his disciples offering a vast mandala of riches, begging for these teachings from Sri Singha, Guru Rinpoche still said no at first. But back at Samye, something finally shifted. He finally agreed to give the introduction to the nature of mind. And so it was in the middle chamber of Samye's main temple that he shared the empowerments and liberating instructions he received directly from his root guru, Sri Singha. He didn't reveal everything, but he gave them just enough, a few key points on the great perfection. And that was the beginning of that transmission to his heart disciples. And it was not before long that Khandra Yeshe Tsogyal herself would receive the entire transmission, and through that rise to become Guru Rinpoche's true, most authentic spiritual heir. And as these events unfolded, the transmission of the Great Perfection teachings to Tibet, and therefore the world, us today, was sealed. So that's a story of the Dzokchen teachings finally being transmitted to Tibet. Now we'll turn to Robbie, who will talk to us about Princess Pemasal and the Great Perfection transmission.
Thank you. So now we turn to the transmission of the heart essence of the Dakini teachings, the Khandra Nintig, and the role of King Trisong Detsen's daughter, Princess Pemasal, in receiving these teachings, and later having them hidden as terma, and then revealed so we could now have them in our world today. So Guru Padmasambhava returned to Chimpu, where he continued to teach to his fortunate disciples. And Dharma King Trisong Detsen, at that time, was in the middle of sponsoring 108 feast offerings when he received the troubling news of his daughter, Pemasal, Princess Pemasal, this 9-year-old, beautiful little girl, had fallen gravely ill. She was led to Chimpu on a white horse. They were hoping to receive blessings from the Mahaguru to help aid the princess and perhaps revive her. But by the time they reached Guru Rinpoche, it was too late, and sadly the young princess had passed away. The party finally arrived in front of Guru Rinpoche and laid the princess down on a rock before the Mahaguru. The king, seeing his beloved daughter's lifeless body, was just completely overcome with grief and as a result fainted. When he came to consciousness again, the Mahaguru had consoled his disciple, King Tresen Ditsen, explaining the teachings of impermanence and the truth of how all compounded things eventually dissolve, nothing lasts forever. So explaining these tough teachings to swallow to King Tresen Ditsen, Noor has a beautiful passage from Pema Katong.
It says in the Gathang, "Listen, Your Majesty. In general, all mundane pursuits are like dreams. The mark of composite things is that they are like magical illusions. Your kingdom is like last night's dream. Your wealth and subjects are like dewdrops on a blade of grass. This fleeting life is like bubbles upon water. All composite things will perish. Meeting ends in separation. All composite things are like this. There is not a single thing that is stable and lasts. Do not cling to the impermanent as being permanent. Train in the non-arising nature of Dharmakaya."
Hearing the Mahaguru's words, King Tresen Ditsen began to find relief from his deep sorrow. Guru Rinpoche explained that Princess Pemasal, in a past life, had amassed great merit at the Buddha stupa. So the story that I've come to know is that Princess Pemasal was actually a bug in a previous life. And if everyone recalls, there's this story of the four brothers at the stupa making these vast aspirations to be reborn. One of the brothers made an aspiration to be reborn as the great Dharma king to spread the Dharma. So this would eventually become King Tresen Ditsen. But during that time, there was a bug sort of circling around the brothers as well. And as I've understood, the brother who made the aspiration to be reborn as the king sort of swatted at the bug kind of mistakenly and created this karmic link with that being. And the bug amassed great karma, just wonderful merit being around these great aspirations. But there was a little bit of negative karma that needed to be purified, both within the bug as a being and within the brother who was making the aspiration to be reborn as the king. And so this link would later manifest as the bug being reborn as the king's daughter, Princess Pemasal, but also this negative karma of passing away at a younger age and the king suffering through that sorrow to sort of purify the karma of his action of swatting at the bug. This is how we have this situation at hand with the king's daughter, Princess Pemasal, passing away at such a young age. So, having set this sort of stage for what happens here, it's a pretty amazing thing that happens next. In a miraculous act, Guru Rinpoche drew a red syllable Nri on her heart, Pemasal's heart, after she had passed away, and spoke her name, thus reviving her before all these astonished onlookers. Once conscious, the Mahaguru then entrusted her with what's called the Khandra Nintik. So he whispered into her ear the essential teachings of the heart essence of the Dakinis. Sadly, she was only able to regain consciousness for a short time. But during this time, she received the full transmission of Guru Rinpoche's teachings of Dzokchen, the Great Perfection. And no one else was able to hear this. So it was fully entrusted, the teachings of the Khandra Nintik, the heart essence of the Dakinis, into the mind stream of Princess Padmasambhava. With the transmission complete, her karma unfolded and she once again passed away. Where her body lay, a vivid triangular imprint appeared, symbolizing the Dharma Daya, the source of all phenomena. The Mahaguru then prophesied that Princess Padmasambhava would be reincarnated as Master Pema Ledretsal, who would later reveal the Khandra Nintik cycle and teach it to Khandra Yeshe Tsogyal. Pema Ledretsal's next rebirth was, of course, the famous omniscient Longchen Rabjam, or Longchenpa. So we'll unpack more of Longchenpa's activity in just a bit, but we'll sort of tie into the next section of Guru Rinpoche's life story here in Shoto Tidro, and Stefan can take it from there.
Thank you. So to also say this in advance, actually the name Khandra Nintik of these teachings is because they were transmitted to the Khandros or Dakinis. So the first being this Princess Padmasambhava, and the second transmission, what we're hearing now about, to Khandra Yeshe Tsogyal, but also being entrusted to a female protectress. So the name Khandra Nintik is given because it was upheld by these great Dakinis, so to speak. And actually, so during the time that Guru Rinpoche was in this exile, which Guru Rinpoche, of course, used with his heart disciples to travel the lands and transmit teachings, there was this secret location that Guru Rinpoche went to, which was called Shoto Tidro, which lies in the Dzokchen Valley to the northeast of Lhasa and has this beautiful limestone mountain formation that creates a very beautiful natural sanctuary, also giving it the name what is called the Terdrum, or treasure chest. And in the lower part of the valley where the rivers converge, you can see or find medicinal hot springs, where the story is that Guru Rinpoche initially subdued some Nagas when approaching the site. And actually originally it said that these there was sort of a lake where the Nagas actually, through their malicious activities, had poisoned the water. But Guru Rinpoche transformed it to become healing springs for his future disciples, particularly healing also skin diseases. And it was here that Guru Rinpoche retreated together with his foremost heart disciple, Khandra Yeshe Tsogyal. So just the two. And here they entered into the deeper retreat where Guru Rinpoche then eventually would transmit these precious teachings also to Khandra Yeshe Tsogyal, which then became his foremost sort of living upholder of the teachings. And currently this cave in the surrounding area is upheld by the Dzokchen Kagyu tradition. And there's here what you can see on the lower part of the picture is the sort of nunnery and the nuns that are maintaining the sacred site and are practicing there in retreat. So with that said, we can turn to Noor, who will share the events that followed.
Thank you, Stefan. So Khandra Yeshe Tsogyal had already demonstrated unwavering devotion to her guru and his teachings, and she thereby proved herself to be an exceptional disciple. Recognizing her extraordinary aptitude, Guru Rinpoche began to transmit to her, step by step, the entirety of the teachings he had received throughout his spiritual journey at the Shoto Tidro caves. Khandra Yeshe Tsogyal received from Guru Rinpoche the Mahaguru, the outer, inner, secret, and innermost empowerments, along with detailed instructions. And with boundless diligence, she put into practice every teaching she received, meditating with unwavering focus day and night. Through her tireless dedication, she swiftly advanced along the path and embodied the profound wisdom of the teachings. Then one day, while Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Sogyal were in retreat at the cave at Jototitro, some wisdom dakinis arrived before the lady and they made this exhortation to her. They said, "This great master, this Nirmanakaya emanation, holds in his mind the profound transmission of the Nintik teachings of direct experience, through which one awakens to Buddhahood in 3 years, and which cause the physical body to vanish in this very lifetime. You should therefore beseech him to give you these instructions." Khandro Yeshe Sogyal therefore prepared a grand feast offering, along with many prostrations and circumambulations, and presented it to Guru Rinpoche and made this request. She said, "Great Master, I humbly ask that you bestow on me the sacred transmission of the Nintik teachings of direct experience, which bring about awakening to Buddhahood and cause the body to vanish in this very lifetime." Guru Padmasambhava was pleased at her request, and he answered, "Sogyal, your request is an excellent one. This advice is quite unlike any other you have received previously. It represents the pinnacle of all the developmental stages of the 9 spiritual approaches. Perceiving its key point nullifies any view and meditation that involve intellectual speculation. The paths and levels of realization are perfected without any need for effort. Negative emotions are freed in their own place without the need for contrivance, transformation, or antidotes. Without being created by causes, the fruition is perfect in itself. Spontaneously present enlightened intent arises in an instant. In this very lifetime, the body of flesh and blood is freed as Sambhogakaya, a state of utter lucidity. Within 3 years, one can journey to the pinnacle realm of Akanisha and reach the Dharmakaya, the ongoing state of genuine being, the precious pure realm of spontaneous presence. Such advice is to be found in the Khandro Nintik, or which can be translated to heart essence of the Dakinis. And he said, "And I will impart it to you." Guru Rinpoche saw that Khandro Yeshe Sogyal showed extraordinary potential, and he foresaw that she would become the main upholder of his lineage and teachings in Tibet, and therefore he agreed to fulfill her request. He opened the mandala of the peaceful and wrathful deities in the Khandro Dzokchen, and the Mahaguru began to transmit to Yeshe Sogyal the innermost fifth instructions of the great perfection in their entirety. 100,000 wisdom dakinis gathered as Guru Rinpoche taught the Khandro Nintik. Heart essence of the dakinis is how we can translate it, and the 18 tantras of the great perfection. Among the many fifth instructions given there, Guru Padmasambhava gave Khandro Yeshe Sogyal this heart advice on overcoming obstacles that hinder recognition of the mind's deepest nature. He said to her, "Sogyal, the empty essence of your awareness is not created by anyone. Without causes and conditions, it is originally present. Don't try to change or alter awareness. Let it remain exactly as it is. Thus, you will be freed from straying. Thus, you will awaken within the state of primordial purity. In the same way, your cognizant nature is originally and spontaneously present, indivisible from emptiness. Its expression, the unconfined capacity of whatever arises, has no concrete existence. Recognize that all 3 aspects of awareness are a great indivisible unity. Thus, you will awaken as the indivisibility of the 3 kayas." It was actually in the Chitro that Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal was appointed as Mahaguru's ultimate heir and lineage holder. And together, Mahaguru and Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal compiled and arranged all these innermost fifth instructions, hiding them as the great Dharma treasures of the Khandro Nintik. Then Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal, for her part, had displayed an incredible mastery of these highest teachings. The Mahaguru now counseled that in order to fulfill her full spiritual potential, she would have to seek out another partner for practice. So Yeshe Tsogyal left for Nepal, while Guru Rinpoche moved to other sacred caves where he gave teachings to his other Tibetan disciples. In Nepal, Yeshe Tsogyal met fellow disciples of the Mahaguru, such as Vasudhara and Shakadevi, and after much hardship, eventually found her companion in Arya Saleh, a young servant whom she freed and who could now take up the path of secret mantra under the guidance of Guru Rinpoche's foremost student. When Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal returned to Tibet, it was with Arya Saleh at her side. Together, they traveled to Dzokchen to begin their retreat. And as the 10th day of the lunar moon arrived, they offered a great feast, and miraculously, Guru Rinpoche appeared before them, and he granted empowerments and blessings. Over the months that followed, Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal attained complete mastery over the 5 elements. She could now pass unhindered through rocks and buildings. She was no longer subject to aging, sickness, and death. Her retreat with Arya Saleh had garnered great rewards, and on its completion, Guru Rinpoche returned to them in person in the Dzokchen and gave them further teachings and instructions. And that only helps to refine their already great realization of Dharma. Mhm.
Nice, thank you, Noor. So now we're going to discuss the transmission, of the Vima Ningtik. So we've been discussing the Khandro Ningtik. Now we're going to move to the Vima Ningtik. So while Guru Rinpoche was central to bringing the great perfection teachings to Tibet, he was not the only one. There was another great master whose role was just as pivotal, and that is the renowned Indian Pandita Vimalamitra, who again we see here on the left. Like Guru Rinpoche, Vimalamitra also studied under the fearless Vidyadhara Sri Singha, pictured on the right, and from him he received the complete Ningtik cycle, the heart essence teachings of Dzokchen, the great perfection. Later in his life, Vimalamitra took up residence in the court of King Indrabhuti of Udayana, where he served as a spiritual advisor. And meanwhile, in Tibet, King Trisang Detsen, urged by his clairvoyant minister, Nyang Tingzeng Zangpo, sent 2 of his best translators, Kawa Paltsek and Chokro Lui Gyaltsen, on a mission to India. And their task was to invite Vimalamitra to Tibet. At that time, Vimalamitra was already 200 years old, an extraordinary being, and known as the greatest among the 500 Panditas of Udayana. When the Tibetan envoys arrived with lavish offerings and their sincere requests, King Indrabhuti gave his blessing. And so, as we mentioned in our webcast last December, Vimalamitra journeyed to Tibet with a host of other great masters to support the growing presence of the Buddhadharma there. But just as with Guru Rinpoche, not everyone in Tibet was thrilled. Certain ministers, clinging to their old ways and jealous of these foreign masters, began whispering in the king's ear. They accused Vimalamitra of being a black magician, and they would tell the king that he is a threat to the realm. And this worked. When Vimalamitra arrived in Tibet, the king refused to meet him. But Vimalamitra, on his part, did not get angry. Instead, he quietly responded in an extraordinary way. Before the entire royal court, he performed a series of miracles, one of them being that he emanated an enormous vision of Buddha Vairochana, It was so vast, it filled all of Samye, and it shone out rays of light in every direction, 5 lights for the 5 wisdoms, amazing the entire crowd and changing the course of Vimlamitra's career, you can say, in Tibet. The king was awestruck, and at that moment, having seen Vimlamitra's qualities, he bowed in deep reverence and asked him to teach the Dharma and assist in translating the sacred texts into Tibetan. And so that's exactly what Vimalamitra did. By day, he taught the sutras, and by night, he transmitted the more secret tantric teachings and pith instructions to a small group of trusted students. Vimalamitra remained in Tibet for 13 years, and then quietly he departed for Wu Taishan, the 5-peak mountain in China, and extraordinarily, he never died. Vimalamitra entered the rainbow body, where he dissolved his physical form into pure light, and it's said that he remains there even now in Wu Taishan in a deathless state, and that he sends an emanation back to Tibet once every 100 years to keep the flame of Dzokchen alive. So the teachings that Vimalamitra shared while in Tibet became known as the Vima Ningtik, the heart essence of Vimalamitra. He transmitted them in many forms, but 2 of his main students, King Trisung Detsen and Nyang Tingzeng Zangpo, received these instructions directly, and they both entered deep retreat in the upper and lower caves of Nyang, which are at Samye Chimpu. Later on, Nyang Tingzeng Zangpo concealed these teachings in a sacred temple that he built, which is known as Sha Langkang in Uru, a region of Tibet. 100 years then passed, and then came along a master named Dangma Thundrup Gyaltsen in the 10th or 11th century, and it was him that uncovered these hidden treasures and passed them on to another great figure by the name of Chetsun Senge Wangchuk. So, guided by a vision of Vimalamitra, Senge Wangchuk journeyed to Samye Chimpu. And when he arrived there, he encountered a mysterious woman. She had conch-like teeth and turquoise eyebrows, and she offered him the teachings Vimalamitra had concealed long ago. And then later on, through more visionary guidance, Senge Wangchuk combined what he had received from his teacher, Dangma Lundrup Gyaltsen, with what he had retrieved in this miraculous moment at Chimpu. He then meditated on these combined teachings for 7 years until he too attained the rainbow body, where his entire physical form transformed into rainbow light. And so, through these generations of realized masters, the Vimanintik lineage was kept alive, each transmission rippling forward in time until it reached one of the great holders of Dzogchen wisdom, the omniscient Longchen Rabjampa. And then through him, these teachings would continue to shine brighter and be passed down to the present day.
And so, sort of further elaborating on Longchenpa's activity, I will speak a bit to how these teachings came to Longchenpa and how he further expanded on them and made it so that we still are able to speak about these things today, because it really is quite amazing. We're talking about these lineages and these transmissions that obviously are still alive. We're, by the nature of us speaking about them and presenting on them here, it shows that the way that they were able to transmit these teachings and that their profundity is still intact is very amazing. So as mentioned above, the Great Perfection teachings had been given directly to the Dharma King Trisung Detsen's daughter, Pemasal, just at the end of her life after she was revived. And as I said, these teachings were sort of implanted in the mind stream of this being. And as is the case with many of the great Tertons, these teachings come to be more effective at times later down the line. And the princess was later reincarnated as Pema Ledrotzel, as mentioned, who at the age of 23 discovered these pith instructions known as the Khandra Nyingtik at the Donglung Tramodrak in Dakpo. Pema Ledrotzel practiced the teachings firstly in secret and later transmitting them to some of his closest disciples. He soon reconciled them, however, knowing that the time for propagating these teachings lay further down the line in the future. Shortly thereafter, the Terten passed into parinirvana at the rather young age of just 25. And as prophesied by Guru Rinpoche in the Pema Katong, Pema Ledrotzel's immediate reincarnation was none other than, as Peter mentioned, the legendary master Gyawa Longchenpa, or Longchen Rabjam, as many know him. Longchenpa originally ordained at Samdrut Rinchen at Samye Chimpu. So again, we see Samye Chimpu coming as serving as a sort of major player in the transmission of these teachings. And Longchenpa spent extended periods studying, meditating, and teaching at Chimpu's Rimotchen cave, and later at his hermitage at Kongri Tukar. His main root teacher, Rigzin Kumaraja, would later grant him the Vimanintik teachings as well, transmitted as we described above by Vimla Mitra, but only after Longchenpa had gone through a good deal of hardship. When Longchenpa entered into retreat to practice these teachings, his past karmic propensities began to ripen, and soon he realized that the Khandra Nyingtik transmitted by Guru Rinpoche and reconciled by his predecessor, Pema Ledrotzel, still lay hidden. So they, as I said above, even though Pema Ledrotzel had sort of revealed these teachings as a terma, it wasn't quite the time for them to really be propagated. And it wasn't until Longchenpa that these teachings we see really explode, and for more and more people to begin to receive this transmission. So kind of knowing where to find these teachings, Longchenpa sent one of his students, Ozer Gocha, to retrieve the Khandra Nyingtik. And after much hardship, Ozer Gocha successfully returned with the scriptures and offered them to Longchenpa. At the time, Longchenpa had a vision of the Dharma protectress, Shenpa Sukdrupma, who presented him with a volume of the very same texts. At 32, while in retreat at the Rimotchen cave in Chimpu, following visions of the Mahaguru and Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal that lasted for 6 days, Longchenpa gave his first transmission of the Nyingtik teachings to 8 fortunate disciples, including Ozer Gocha. During the empowerments, the protectress Ekajati entered one of Longchenpa's female students and gave prophecies. Further, in visions, Guru Padmasambhava and Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal transmitted the full Nyingtik teachings to Longchenpa. The Mahaguru granted him the name Drime Ozer, or stainless light, and Yeshe Tsogyal granted him the name Dorje Ziji, or blazing Vajra. And it was during these Nyingtik transmissions that Longchenpa sang this Vajra song, which Nora will share with us.
Oh, yogis, I am so very happy and joyous. Tonight, we are in the Pure Land, unexcelled. In our bodies, the palace of peaceful and wrathful deities, flourishes the assembly of Buddhas, the union of clarity and emptiness. Buddhahood is not somewhere else, but in us. O meditators, you who hold your minds one-pointedly, don't hold your mind in one place, but let it go at ease. Mind is emptiness or openness, whether it goes or stays. Whatever arises in the mind is the mere play of wisdom.
And additionally, during Longchenpa's retreat at Chimpu, he discovered 3 Terma scrolls, including one for the Ronji Azer, the luminosity of the 4 lamps. And what Longchenpa did subsequently was sort of what he's most famous for, which is kind of combining these aspects. So you have these 2 Dzokchen lineages, the one of Vimalamitra, as we've described, and the one of Guru Rinpoche, both stemming from the Mahasiddha traditions in India, from Sri Singha. But what Longchenpa did is he combined this Khandra Nintik with this Vima Nintik in what is known as the Nintik Yapshi. And this sort of, the translation of this Nintik Yapshi, we could say, is the 4 seminal heart essences. But this kind of serves as the backbone to the Dzogchen tradition that we have today with us in this world. So after a lifetime of practicing, realizing, and synthesizing the Nintik teachings, Longchenpa at one point knew that his wisdom mind was soon to part from his physical body. So he journeyed once more back to Samye Chimpu, and arriving, famously declared to Noor.
He said, "This place is just like the Sitavana charnel ground in India. I would rather die here than be born elsewhere. Here I will leave this worn out, illusory body of mine."
Though Longchenpa intended to pass away at that site, he was requested to bestow empowerments to a large group of people waiting below at Samye Monastery, which is where he would later leave his body after several days. While this would be his final visit in his physical human form to the great meditation cave of Chimpu, he would return many times in visions, in particular to his own emanation, Rigzin Jigme Lingpa, who will describe later on his activities in the caves of Samye Chimpu. So to conclude, we'll pass it back over to Stefan.
Thank you. So what we looked at today was very much the transmission of the teachings that Guru Rinpoche first introduced to Tibet, and how these transmissions sort of one by one sort of went through the great lineage of the great masters. So we also wanted to show a little bit the transmission actually of the teachings. Although at parts it might have been, we're very sorry for that, a little bit more dry. But actually there's, what this showcases is, on the one hand, really the authentic transmission of the teachings itself, how these are really upheld throughout their introduction to this world till the present day through these amazing teachers, these great masters, how through practicing these teachings they received accomplishment themselves, and then how they transmitted them through to the next, to the students, who in turn became then lineage upholders. So highlighting also this great importance in particular then of the sort of, you could say, most sacred or most important lineage with the most profound teachings. You can also see that reflected, for example, Kyabje Nishu Ken Rinpoche wrote this great marvelous garland of rare gems, as it's translated into English, and you can find it as a book. It's really like massive, and it's very beautiful stories. So what we presented today also draws from that. And then in a more essential way, there's Tulku Thondup Rinpoche's famous book, Masters of Meditation and Miracles, or Miracles and Meditation. Also very beautiful, focusing on this profound lineage. And what we can also see here reflected in this transmission, particularly with the stories at the very beginning, it's really, again, this interplay between the students and the great master, and actually the time and effort that it took them, and the circumstances that were set by the students and also by the teacher, that this all is coming together in the most beautiful and intimate setting where the students really open their hearts to the fullest, but also the time they invested and the effort and the dedication and devotion that they showed to receive these teachings, which I think is always very important to reflect upon. Often in comparison to, let's say, how fortunate we are in terms of how easy it is sometimes to receive teachings for us. So here it's very beautiful, especially it's very highlighted by the tradition how these great Dakinis, first Lacham Pemasal, the daughter of the king, receives these precious teachings, and then how they are passed through the lineage, and then of course Kandri Yeshe Tsogyal, who actually becomes the first Tibetan to attain awakening. And then later how the lineages are transmitted as well through the Vimanentik, and how they then sort of come together in this amazing figure called Gyalwa Longchenpa, who sort of unified all these streams of teachings into one and further transmitted them, and where many of the greatest masters then pass on these lineages. So what we have seen then is the Dharma lineage by Guru Padmasambhava, as transmitted to these Dakinis, and hence called the Kanjanintik. And then we have what is called the oral lineage, that was partially hidden, that the Vidyadhara Vimalamitra taught principally to Dharma King Tritsun Detsen, and then also transmitted to his heart disciple Nang Tingzin Sangpo, who became the principal custodian, and how then the lineage was partially hidden as a terma, but also orally transmitted. That's why it's also called here the oral lineage of these teachings. And at the same time, actually, Guru Rinpoche transmitted beyond these streams that we have heard individual pith instruction to various disciples beyond his principal disciples, which was then likewise hidden as termas and became sort of additional streams of blessings that were passed down this lineage. And finally, so to come to the third lineage that we introduced at the beginning but haven't mentioned so far, that of the great Lotsawa Vairochana, which you can see here in the picture on the left. Then in the center, of course, his teacher, Guru Rinpoche. And then to the right, you can see the Guru Rinpoche's heart disciple, Kandri Yeshe Tsogyal. So it was after Dharma King Tritsun Detsen had entered the Parinirvana that Guru Rinpoche, along with a few selected students, such as these two, and as well as Yuja Ningpo, they traveled to a particular place in Kham, so in eastern Tibet, called Moshe Tsam. And they went to a very precious cave called Pema Shelpuk that some of you might also familiar be with. It's also the site of the revelation of the famous Green Tara practice called Zaptik Drolshok. And it's here in this cave that actually Guru Rinpoche and Lochen Verotsana primarily engage in a discussion on the teachings that they had received from their teacher Sri Singha, which, as we mentioned at the beginning, is the teacher for all the sort of Dzokchen lineages that we receive, are sort of united in India, and is sort of in many ways the principal source. And what you can see is that in this division actually of the great perfection teachings, where we have the Semde, Longde, and Mengakde with sort of the mind, the space, and the pith instruction section. These lineages, the two lineages that we mentioned up till now so far, were primarily focused on the Mengak or pith instruction section. but it was actually Lochen Verotsana who also received extensive teachings on the other two categories. Not to speak that the other masters didn't do that, but the other masters had focused so far on the transmission of the Mengak De section. And so what then Guru Rinpoche and Lochen Verotsana, in sort of their discussion on these precious teachings that they received, is that they compiled a teaching that covers all three of those sections into one. And this is what it became known as either the Verunintik, sort of the heart essence of Vairochana, or what is also then called famously the Dzokchen Desum, or the heart essence of the three sections. And, or in other words, actually the three sections of the Great Perfection, sorry for that. And you can see that also being highlighted, for example, very beautifully in the great book called Blazing Splendor, the memoirs of Kyabche Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. A very beautiful book with very beautiful lineage stories also on this particular teaching. So you can also refer to that. And here, this was then, as it was codified by these great masters, including Khandro Yeshe Tsogya was present and the other students, it was then subsequently also hidden as termas. And it's very interesting because it was then revealed by Terchen Chökche Deshin Shikpo Lingpa and Jamyang Khenso Wangpo and Jumbo Kongtrul Rinpoche. So very recent sort of to our time in comparison to the other timelines. From the great site actually that it was codified, which is the Pema Shelpok in Tibet. And it's really sort of one of the most important treasures of these three masters that are, again, as also highlighted in our book series, but also by the life stories that we share, are sort of the great upholders in the more recent time of the lineage of Guru Rinpoche and ensuring that all these precious teachings are vibrant and alive to the present time. Yeah. So we just wanted to introduce you also to this third transmission at the conclusion of this webcast. What we have planned is that in the next webcast in May, we will be looking into Guru Rinpoche hiding Dharma treasures and then Guru Rinpoche's departure from Tibet. But then in the subsequent one, which is in June, we wanted to focus on Guru Rinpoche's legacy, yeah? And Guru Rinpoche's, the great treasure revealers who revealed the treasures that Guru Rinpoche had hidden and upheld them. So we wanted to focus on these three masters, Terchen Chökche Lingpa, Jamyang Khenso Wangpo, and Jumbo Kongtrul Rinpoche in particular, and share some stories and show some images from these precious sites. So hoping that all of us can connect together and have sort of a jump in time to the more recent one. Yeah. Yeah, this concludes our today's webcast. Thank you so much. As I said, in the resources such as the books on this precious lineage, as well as the Guru Rinpoche books, you can actually read more in this transmission, particularly in the Tibet book. You can find a section called towards the end, Wellsprings of the Great Perfection. If you want to, if this was actually too fast or too many names, too many places, then you can go there. These three books are still available on Amazon for you to purchase either as an ebook or as a hard copy. So if you haven't, check it out. Yeah. And yeah, thank you so much to everybody. Please support us if you can. And if you have any questions, then you can share them with us now. And if not, then Robbie will lead us in the dedication. And thank you so much for joining us again here today. It's always so lovely to have everybody here. And yeah, thank you for participating.
Thank you all. And I don't see a lot of questions here, but just an additional aspiration is that we can connect to authentic lineage holders of this tradition that we've spent so much time describing the transmission of, as we're very lucky that there are many lamas that still hold this lineage intact, and we've done our best to present the transmission of this lineage, but we are by no means authorized to speak on this subject past just describing its history. So I'm making aspirations that we can all connect in a profound way to the essence of these teachings. And so with that,
just to jump in here quickly, because so in this lineage also we have a very nice aspiration, which, as Robbie mentioned, that we can add here now, that's often recited, and I can read it out, and then Robbie can continue with the dedication. So the root teacher in this transmission is often said to be or seen as the great Buddha Samantabhadra. So we have this very beautiful aspiration that reads, from the great Samantabhadra Vajradhara down until our own kind root guru, may the aspirations made for the benefit of beings be fulfilled this very day. So just wanted to share also this very beautiful aspiration that is in this sense recited. And then Robbie, please dedicate further for us. Thank you.
thank you, Stefan. So yeah, to conclude, through this merit, may all attain omniscience and conquer the enemy, wrong action. May all be freed from samsara's ocean and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Okay, thank you all. We hope to see you again in a month, and enjoy the rest of your Guru Rinpoche day, whether it's late in the evening or very early in the morning. We wish you well and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.